Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and basically sit back down and get into some good old DC Bloodlines. I don't know why I say good old DC Bloodline because for the most part, Bloodlines, it's really just okay storyline. Now, as you all know, in the early 1990s, DC Comics were technically struggling, right? When it came to DC, they kind of wonder like what kind of moves to make to get fans back into their comics. And so DC Bloodlines was one of their moves. You see, for DC, they felt like they needed some new heroes to kind of bring life into their books, to bring new and old fans into their comics. And so for DC Bloodlines, it was this massive event that introduced new characters left and right. Each chapter was technically used as a way to introduce these new heroes. Now, in each chapter, they took place in annuals that belonged to other books. So, like for example, you had Man of Steel, or Green Lantern, or Flash, or Batman, and the list goes on. They all had annuals that were technically being used for this event. Now, when it came to Superman books, there were four of them at the time. And the reason why, because Superman and also Batman were like DC's two most popular heroes. So for DC, they had to chunk out a lot of books with those two heroes. But around this time in DC Comics, Superman was dead. And so with him being dead, you didn't have the reign of the Superman happening. So you had Steel, Cyborg Superman, the Eradicator, Superboy, while Clark Kent was quote unquote dead. And so for those four annuals that took place in this event, you didn't have Clark Kent. You had Steel, like for example, the Man of Steel annual we covered that introduced Edge. You also had Steel in that book, but also you have this one right here, the Superman annual that focuses on Cyborg Superman, but also introducing another bloodline character. And so, as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, we're really picking up with this garbage truck heading over to the city dump. Now, of course, as we all know, with a garbage truck is going to unload a lot of garbage at the city dump. The problem is that part of its load is holding onto what seems to be a dead body of a woman. Now, this woman will become very important for the overall story of this chapter of DC Bloodlines. But with this flashback now being done, we're now able to transition into the present day. And when we do, we pick up with Cyborg Superman. Now, technically, around this time in DC Comics, he wasn't really calling himself Cyborg Superman, and let me explain. With Clark Kent being dead, you had four new Supermen appear: Eradicator, Superboy, Steel, and Cyborg Superman. Now, for DC, they were also kind of playing this small game of who is the real Superman. And so when it came to Cyborg Superman, and for me personally also the Eradicator, they were the closest to the idea of being Clark Kent, who had came back to life, or could have been the real Superman. And so when it came to Cyborg Superman, when it comes to him being a hero, he does believe that he could possibly be the real Superman. And other people are kind of wondering the same thing. But when it comes to Cyborg Superman trying to be the hero of Metropolis, he's right now helping out Commissioner Henderson. Now, Commissioner Henderson is kind of like the Jim Gordon for Metropolis at this point in time, but also he's right now working on a case because for the Metropolis Police Department, they had just found a pile of dead bodies. Here's the catch though, the pile of dead bodies they found are very similar in what we saw in the earlier chapters of DC Bloodlines. Because remember, there are bloodline parasites out there that are being used for this event. Let me explain. You see, when it came to DC Comics, they had to find a way to introduce the wave of brand new characters they were trying to get working. And so they used bloodline parasites. Bloodline parasites were basically created for this event. They appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the universe, and they fought against Lobo and also Legion in the first chapter of this event. Now, technically, the first chapter did introduce a new character, and that would be Layla, and she did gain abilities thanks to the bloodline parasites. And let me explain. The bloodline parasites, they feed on spinal fluids. Now, most of the time, when they use their ways of getting the spinal fluids, they're killing the person they're feeding off of. But occasionally, when they do feed off on somebody, they're also activating that person's metagene and being able to bring that person back to life, but also with abilities as well. And so for Cyborg Superman, also Henderson, the dead bodies they're finding right now, they were people who were killed off by the bloodline parasites. We also get the idea that for the commissioner, he's not really trying to work with Cyborg Superman because he does not believe that this guy is the real Superman. But now we have to switch over to the city dump. Now, when we do, we're picking up with two bloodline parasites, Gamir and Venev. Now, these two bloodline parasites, like I said earlier, they're being used as a way to introduce a new DC hero by drinking people's spinal fluids. And so for these two characters, at the city dump right now, killing off people who work at the city dump. But then one of them realized there's a dead body that's currently being buried by a bunch of trash. And of course, it's the same one we saw earlier at the very beginning of this storyline. So you have the bloodline parasites undig that dead body and then drink that person's spinal fluid, a young woman. But like I said earlier, sometimes for the bloodline parasites, when they drink someone's spinal fluid, it also activates their metagene. And of course, bringing in a brand new DC hero. And so for the bloodline parasites, once they're done feeding off this young woman's spinal fluid, and we're kind of left to believe she was already dead. But in reality, thanks to the bloodline parasites, they were able to bring her back to life by drinking her spinal fluid, but also activating her metagene, and the beginning of the process of bringing in a new DC hero. But now we have to switch over to the commissioner, and you have the commissioner meeting up with, well, Lex Luthor II. Yes, I said the second, and here's a reason why. Because in the 1990s, Lex had supposedly died, and then he had a son. But in reality, this guy, come to find out, is not his son. That matter of fact, it's just Lex pretending to be his son. Yeah, you heard that right. But anyways, though, when it comes to the commissioner, he went to Lex for help with the case, because with dead bodies piling up left and right, and you also have Lex being the big guy of Metropolis, but also the fact that a lot of different things go through Lex in LexCorp, he's kind of hoping that Lex might have an answer about what's going on in Metropolis with all these dead bodies piling up left and right. But here's the thing, because you didn't have this other character appear, better known as Mr. Green. And when it comes to Mr. Green, he went to the police earlier to help find his missing daughter. And so when he does see the commissioner with Lex, he's kind of like, hey man, I need you out there and find my daughter. She's missing. Now, we do learn here that Mr. Green's daughter, Sasha, was killed off by Lex Luthor. And the reason why, because Lex hired her to kind of help learn some martial arts. But then one day, she showed him up in front of Lois Lane, and both ladies had laughed at him. And so because he was embarrassed, he killed her off, and most likely had her body left somewhere. But here's the big catch. Sasha is alive, and let me explain. When it comes to Sasha, she was killed off by Lex Luthor, and her body was dumped in the city dump. But of course, as we saw earlier, the bloodline parasites, well, they brought her back to life. And so Sasha was brought back to life with powers, but the thing is for Sasha, she does not remember anything from her past or her own name. Now, you do have Sasha head over to a nearby gym. Now, when she does that, she takes a shower, wash off the blood, but then she runs into Muriel. Now, for Muriel, she's a lady who's just worried about Sasha. She saw the way she looks and wanted to help out Sasha. But the problem is that when it comes to Muriel, when she does touch Sasha on her shoulder, Sasha's mind is now able to connect with Muriel's mind. And with their minds now being connected, for Sasha, she's now able to absorb the memories out of Muriel's mind into her own mind, but also kind of build this persona in Sasha's mind, to the point where Sasha now believes that she is Muriel, but in reality, she's not. Now, when it comes to Muriel, she just completely passes out after touching Sasha. But getting back over to Cyborg Superman, we do see him going out of his way to listen in on the conversation between Lex Luthor and also the Commissioner. Now, for Cyborg Superman, he does not have that super hearing. So he's not really able to hear in normally how Superman does. He has to use the cyborg side to kind of listen in on the conversation between the Commissioner and Lex Luthor. Now, with him doing that, he does learn here that for Lex Luthor, he did examine all the different dead bodies. Unfortunately, he wasn't really able to learn much from the dead bodies, except he did find some kind of chemical on every single dead body. But before we learn what that chemical was, for Cyborg Superman, he overhears a phone call the Commissioner has. Another body has popped up, most likely more than just one body. And so for Cyborg Superman, this is the chance to go to a crime scene before the Commissioner gets there and to hopefully get some answers about what's going on. But now we have to shift our focus back over to Sasha, who's currently believing that she's Muriel, to the point where she begins to wear Muriel's clothes, leaves the gym, and goes over to Muriel's car. Now, the problem is for Muriel, she had friends at the gym, and one of those friends realized there's some lady getting into her friend's car. And so you do have this random lady go out of her way to stop Sasha. And the thing with Sasha, she's still able to get inside the car and drive off. But now you have the entire gym now knowing that, well, for Muriel, the real one, she just got robbed by some random woman. Not random, it's Sasha. But getting back over to, well, Cyborg Superman, we see him arrive at the scene of the crime. A bunch of dead bodies, but this time at the city dump. As we all know, earlier, that was when you had the Parasites bring, well, Sasha back to life, but they did kill off other people before going after her. Except now you have Cyborg Superman look around and find a huge pile of blood. And so he's kind of wondering, like, not pile, a puddle of blood, say it correctly, a puddle of blood. But for the police and also Cyborg Superman, they believe that their killer must have taken away the dead body somewhere else. But in reality, that dead body was brought back to life, and of course now it's Sasha walking around. But either way, for Cyborg Superman, he does take a sample of her blood that she left behind. And he does find something in the blood, that same chemical that Lex was Commissioner earlier. Now, for Sasha, it's still her just walking around the city, except then she walks in the middle of two guys trying to kill each other with their guns. Now, here's the catch, because one of those guys, they do touch her. When that happens, his mind is now connected to her mind. And so with that happening, she now absorbs everything about him from his mind into her own, and of course building another persona in her mind where she believes that she is this guy and she wants to find his opponent in the shootout and to hopefully get, him killed. But then she looks into the mirror and sees her reflection and realizes that she is a lady, but she still believes that she's that thug from earlier. But when it comes to Cyborg Superman, he heads over to where Lex Luthor is at. Now, for Cyborg Superman, this is him trying to work with Lex Luthor to kind of figure out what's going on in Metropolis. For Lex Luthor, he begins to at first freak out because he believes that for Cyborg Superman, that he has put everything together when it comes to Sasha Green, that he was the one that had killed her off, because he has no idea that technically she is alive again. But for Cyborg Superman, he's here to work with Lex. He's kind of like, listen, I got this blood sample of Sasha Green that was left behind at a scene of the crime. When I ran her blood sample, I found some kind of chemical that you had also found as well in the other dead bodies, which also means that for Sasha, she was killed off by our crazy killer. And so it's him just wanting to confirm with Lex Luthor, they both agree on the same thing. And so for Lex, he does catch a big time breather here because he was freaking out like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy is going to figure out I killed off Sasha. But you also have the Commissioner appear. Now, when he does appear, he gets a call just like that. And the reason why, another dead body. Except this time, this dead body belongs to the guy who got killed off earlier when he touched Sasha while in the middle of a shootout. And so for Cyborg Superman, also Commissioner, they want to head over to that scene of the crime. Except when they walk outside, they run into a lady with a gun, and that would be Sasha. But here's the catch though, because for Sasha, she no longer believes that she was that guy from earlier. She now believes that she is Muriel again, the first person she had touched. Here's the catch. Muriel is the sister to the commissioner. And so for Sasha, who believes to be Muriel, is now believing that she's having a conversation with the commissioner, her brother. Now for Lex, he begins to freak out. And the reason why, because he believes once Sasha is able to remember everything from her past, that she'll go out her way and spill the beans about him killing her off. And so he turns on his building's self-defense system to hopefully kill her off. Now, luckily, you have Cyborg Superman there to protect her, but then she is knocked out by, well, the attack. But you have Lex, the commissioner, and also Cyborg Superman agree to take her inside. And the reason why, to do some work on her, because they still believe that Sasha is involved with the whole idea of the dead bodies popping up left and right. And technically, they are correct. And so for our heroes plus Lex Luthor, they believe if they're able to study Sasha, it could help them figure out who is the killers, which again is the Bloodline Parasites. And so this for me kind of leads into, I want to say, a rush ending, and let me explain why I'm saying that. Because when it comes to Sasha, we see her right now just being studied by the scientists who work for Lex Luthor. And so with the scientists trying to study her and learn more about her, they do learn that she is a metahuman, and they kind of believe the fact that she is a metahuman most likely saved her life. But on top of that, you'd have Lex Luthor trying his best to get rid of Cyborg Superman and the Commissioner to allow him enough time to get rid of Sasha. Because again, he still fears the fact that if she wakes up and she goes back to normal, she is going to tell everyone with the fact that he tried to kill her off. And so you had Lex Luthor set off a bomb somewhere else to have the Commissioner and Cyborg Superman go over there to see what in the world is going on. But while you have those two heroes dealing with the bomb over there, we learn that one of the scientists is actually an assassin that works for Lex Luthor. And so for Lex, this is perfect. And the reason why, because now he can tell the assassin to take Sasha away and to hopefully get rid of her. And the thing is, the assassin does try to get rid of Sasha, except once again, when you have Sasha touch somebody like the assassin, she absorbs everything about them from their mind into her own mind, building, again, another persona. And so you do see Sasha being able to use the skills of the assassin to help her escape. We also learn here that once she does touch somebody else and their minds are linked to one another, she can tell that person what to do. And so she tells the assassin to go ahead and kill themselves, which of course they go ahead and do. But you didn't have the helicopter crash, and so the Lex and also Cyborg Superman and also the Commissioner, they believe that Sasha's dead, but in reality, she's alive. And we learned that her superhero name is going to be, well, Myraid. But when it comes to this character, like most characters in DC Bloodlines, she'll have a few more appearances here and there in DC Comics, but nothing really major again down the road. And we'll see her again when it comes to DC Bloodlines. But yeah, this is it for today's video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.